Hey guys, here are the notes for Unit 5, Section 3. This time we're going to be talking about special right triangles. And the first one we're going to talk about is a 30, 60, 90 special right triangle. They're special because the sides are in a proportion here, a 1 to 2 to 3 ratio. And it's also special because it's half of an equilateral triangle. If you take an equilateral triangle, in this case the equilateral triangle has all sides that are 8, and you bring an altitude straight down from one of the angles, you're going to cut this into two congruent triangles. They're going to be exactly the same. Normally all three angles would be 60 degrees, but you cut this one 60 in half, so these are both 30s. So you've got a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. Now there are two small formulas that work for every 30, 60, 90. It doesn't matter how big it is, how small it is, because if you've got a big 30, 60, 90 and a small 30, 60, 90, they're still similar triangles because the angles are the same. So you have two special little formulas. The first one is that the hypotenuse is twice as long as the short leg, or you could put h equals the short leg times 2. So if you have a hypotenuse of 8, then you've got your shorter leg. Now remember, the shorter leg is across from the smaller angle. So the 30-degree angle, go across from that, and your shorter leg is going to be half of your hypotenuse. So if you've got 8, your shorter leg is 4. The reason for that is because this altitude came straight down and cut this side exactly in half. So what was your hypotenuse, and now you have would have been another hypotenuse down here, now became a short leg, which is cut in half. So half of your hypotenuse is always your short leg. The second little formula is that your long leg is the short leg times radical 3. So if you have a short leg, you can multiply it by radical 3 and it will give you your longer leg. So if I know my short leg is 4, if I multiply it by radical 3, I get my longer leg. Now remember, the longer leg is always across from the bigger angle. 60-degree angle is going to be across from the longer leg. So if your shorter leg is 4, your longer leg is going to be more than that. It's going to be 4 radical 3. Now you may have to go backwards sometimes. Sometimes they might give you the longer leg, so you're going to divide by radical 3 to get your short leg. So you would just basically divide by radical 3. This would cancel out and you go back to 4. They might give you the short leg and ask you for the hypotenuse. Then you're going to take the short leg, you're going to double it to get your hypotenuse. These formulas are interchangeable. You can solve for any variable here. I can solve for the short leg, I can solve for the short leg down here. So these are interchangeable. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Here is our first one. We want to find the value of x and the value of y. So we've got a 30-degree angle, so across from that is my short leg. Okay, I'm going to put short leg right here, SL for short leg. Let me make it bigger so you can actually see it. Okay, so short leg is going to be on this side. This one's going to be my longer leg. And the reason for that is because if this is a 30-degree angle and that's a 90-degree angle, then this other one has to be a 60-degree angle in here. So you have no other choice. This has to be 60 degrees. Alright, so if they give us 18 for my hypotenuse, now remember the hypotenuse is the short leg times 2. So if they give me the hypotenuse, if I was to divide both sides by 2, my short leg would actually equal my hypotenuse cut in half. So remember, if I know the hypotenuse, if I cut it in half, I get my short leg. This was an 8, it became a 4. So if this is an 18, my short leg now has to become a 9. So my short leg is going to be 9 right here. My longer leg is going to be my shorter leg, which is 9, but I'm going to multiply it by radical 3, because to get the longer leg, you take your short leg and you times it by radical 3. So I'm going to take the 9 and I'm going to multiply it. Let me put a 3 there too. I'm going to multiply it by radical 3. Okay, so 9 radical 3 would be that'll be my longer leg. So you got x is 9 and y would be 9 radical 3. Now you could solve that as a decimal too. You could find out what radical 3 is, which is about 1.7, and then times it by 9, and you get your answer for the long leg as a decimal too. A lot of times you'll see it left as a radical though. Now here's I got a 60-degree angle, so my longer leg is down here, Let me label that for us. This is the LL, longer leg. That means that this has to be my short leg on this side. And this has to be my hypotenuse over here. So that's across from the right angle. It's going to be the hypotenuse. This time they gave me the longer leg is a 5. So this one actually is a little challenging. To go back to get the short leg, you have to take this longer leg and divide it by radical 3 to get back to your short leg. So this time I got to take the 5 and I got to divide it by radical 3. So this is going to look a little different here. You're going to take 5 and you're going to divide it by radical 3. Okay, so we've got 5 divided by radical 3 here. Now you can't leave a radical on the bottom. So if you remember, we have to divide top and bottom by radical 3. That's called rationalizing the denominator. We have to divide both sides by the radical 3. So actually what you're going to get for this answer is you're going to get 5 radical 3 on top, and you're going to get a 3 on the bottom. The bottom number is going to come out because radical 3 times radical 3 will be 3. So the bottom number actually comes out of the radical. The top number does not come out of the radical. So you have to leave that 5 radical 3 next to it. So that would be your short leg. Your short leg is 5 radical 3 over 3. That cannot be reduced. So let me circle that so you know that that is our solution for the short leg. That's your short leg right there. Now your hypotenuse is twice this amount. Remember the short leg is take 4, the hypotenuse was 8. So what I have to do is I have to take this amount, 5 radical 3 over 3, and I have to double it. In other words, I have to multiply it. Oops. I have to multiply it by like a 2 or a 2 over 1. So if I multiply it by 2 over 1, all I'm really multiplying together would be the 2 times the 5. The radical 3 is going to stay, and the 3 is going to stay because 3 times 1 is still 3. So what you're going to have over here is going to be 10 radical 3 over 3. So that will be your hypotenuse. You always take your short leg and multiply it by 2. When they give you the long leg, that's the most work. If they give you the short leg, your work's going to be really easy. If they give you the hypotenuse, your work's going to be pretty easy. It's just when they give you this when they give you the long leg, you got to divide it by radical 3, which means you got to get rid of this radical here, and you're going to end up with a radical in your answer. So that's when it takes a little longer. Pause that if you need to stop. I'm going to move on. Now you've got one more special right triangle, which is half of a square. And this was an example we did on the notes earlier. When we were doing Pythagorean theorem, I actually did this example. If both sides were 7, the hypotenuse was 7 radical 2. We did that in our other notes. You should go back and check that out. But whenever you've got two legs the same, that means you cut a square in half, your diagonal becomes the same number times radical 2. That always comes out as radical 2. So both legs in a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle are the same. That means it's an isosceles right triangle. The hypotenuse is the leg times radical 2. So you take your leg and multiply it by radical 2, you get your hypotenuse. If they give you the hypotenuse and you want to go backwards, you got to divide by radical 2 to go backwards. If I was to divide by radical 2, the radical 2's would cancel out and I'd have a 7. So you can just solve for the leg here by dividing by radical 2 on both sides. You get leg equals hypotenuse over radical 2. Let's look at a couple of examples here. First one is really easy. If they give you the two legs, that's an easy one. You're just going to get 3 radical 2. So let's put that in there. Right there. That would be your x there. Now this one's a little difficult because you got to go backwards. You got to take the 8 and you got to divide it by radical 2. So a little bit more work here. you got to take 8 and divide by radical 2. Now remember, you can't have a radical on the bottom, so we're going to need to do what we did before and multiply by radical 2 over radical 2. So you're going to end up with an 8 times a radical 2 on top, 8 radical 2, and on the bottom radical 2 times radical 2 is 2. You're going to end up with 8 radical 2 over 2. Oops, that's not the right place for the radicals, sorry. Okay, 8 radical 2 over 2 looks like that. Now there is something we could still do to finish that. You could actually reduce 8 over 2. So your actual answer is going to be 4 radical 2. Because 8 divided by 2 is 4, and then you still have your radical 2 there. So you're going to end up with 4 radical 2 as your answer. Now I want to see if you can see the shortcut. To get from the hypotenuse to the leg, there is a shortcut. Notice my hypotenuse was 8. My leg was 4 radical 2. So if you notice, you took the 8, you cut it in half, and then you put a radical 2 next to it. That's basically what's happening when you divide top and bottom by, or when you multiply the top and bottom by radical 2. You're taking the hypotenuse, you're cutting it in half, and you're putting a radical 2 next to it. And remember, in a 45, 45, 90, both of these are the same. So this side is also going to be 4 radical 2. So both of them come out to be 4 radical 2. Both legs would be 4 radical 2. Now how do you remember if it's a radical 2, or back in this example, if it's a radical 3? Here's how I teach everybody to remember it. In this case, you've got 3 different angles. You got a 30, a 60, and 90. 3 different angles is going to make you use a radical 3. In this special triangle, you've only got 2 different angles. You've got 45s and you got 90. So 45s and 90, you're going to be using radical 2 because there's only 2 different kinds of angles. It may help you remember it. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples more real quick. This is just a challenge for you. Tomorrow I'll get a few people to give me an answer and we can see who gets the prizes. A, B, C, and D, it says put the following in order from least to greatest. No, sorry, greatest to least. Put them in order from greatest to least. So solve for x in each one and put them in the correct order. Give me the correct order for those letters. Let's look at this one here. Special right triangle, you've got 45. That means that these are both 45s. So it's definitely a square. That means C and D are going to be the same amount. And it's actually the exact same problem as what I just did right down here. The hypotenuse is 8. So if you look at this one, the hypotenuse is 8. So I'm going to cut that in half and make it a 4, and then I'm going to put a radical 2 next to it. So that's going to be 4 radical 2, and D is also going to be 4 radical 2. So they are the same, both of them 4 radical 2's. Because that's a square, so they have to have the same sides. They're all 4 radical 2's because this is 8. If you took 4 radical 2 and times it by radical 2, you would get 4 times 2, which would come out to be 8. So that works both ways. This one you've got H and F, and you've got a 30, 60, 90. Again, you've got the longer leg, so again, I made it really tough on you. Sorry, guys. If you got the shorter leg, that'd be a lot easier. The longer leg makes it a lot tougher. So the longer leg, you got to take the 8, and you got to divide it by radical 3. So you're going to take that 8, divide it by radical 3. So you're actually going to get 8 over radical 3, but you're going to need to make sure you get rid of that denominator. Oops. So you can't have the radical 3 on the bottom. So we're going to multiply both sides by radical 3 over radical 3. So long story short, you're going to get an 8 radical 3 on top. You're going to get a 3 on the bottom. That's going to be your answer for F. If you take that short leg and you times it by 2, you're going to end up with this longer leg right here. which is going to end up being 16 radical 3 over 3. Because really all you're doing is taking the 8 and multiplying it by 2. Because when you multiply by 2 over 1, the 3 times 1 is still 3, and the 8 times 2 is where I get my 16. So if I took this and doubled it, I'm going to get this amount right here. This example says to find the area. In order to find the area, we need the base times the height. So in this figure, the area equals base times height. And actually, let me put that in there. Base times height is our area. Oops. And we have the base is 5. So we already know the base. We just need to find the height. Now let's see if we can find this height. We got a 60, that means this is the long leg. And my short leg is going to be half of this 4. So my short leg is actually going to be a 2. Let me make that a different color so you can see that it's different. Now that's actually a side there. That's 2 right here because half of the hypotenuse is the short leg. Take the 2 and multiply it by radical 3 and you'll get your longer leg. So anytime you have a short leg in the 30, 60, 90, multiply it by radical 3 and you get your long leg. So that's just 2 radical 3. So your base is 5. This piece was 2. The whole thing is 5. So your base is 5 and your height is 2 radical 3. So you're going to multiply 5 times 2, times 2 radical 3. And that will give you your area of 5 times 2. Area is 10 radical 3. So 10 radical 3 would be your area. Alright, and the last two I'm going to let you try. They're multiple choice. Actually, I'll show you this one really quick because it's not long. If these two are equal, if 21 it was equal to 21, or if 20 was equal to 20, then these two angles would be equal. They would both be 45s because 45, 45, and 90 makes your right triangle. Since one of them is bigger than the other, that means one angle is bigger than the other. 20 is across from a smaller angle, 21 is across from a bigger angle. So if they were the same, they'd be 45, but since 21 is across from the bigger angle, this one has to be greater than 45. So that has to be C right there. 21 is bigger, so this angle is going to be bigger than this angle. If they were both the same, they would both be 45s, but since this angle is larger, then it has to be more than 45 degrees, because if they were the same, they'd both be 45. Find the perimeter of the triangle. So you've got a 12, this is going to be a 6, this is going to be a 6 radical 3. You take your hypotenuse and you divide it by 2. So if I divide this by 2, that's how I got the 6. If I take the 6 and I multiply it by radical 3, that's how I got the longer leg. So 12 divided by 2 is 6, that would be my short leg. Take 6 times it by radical 3, that would be my long leg. The whole perimeter is going to be 12 plus 6 radical 3. Let's find out what 6 radical 3 is really quick. Let's use our calculator. We need to find out radical 3, so 3 square root times it by 6 equals, and then you're going to add a 6 and you're going to add a 12. And you're going to get 28.4 when you round it off. So 28.4 there is letter A is your perimeter. Alright, there's your notes. We'll see you guys tomorrow.